Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brad from the Ad Army, and today I actually want to talk to you about a Pokemon theory that I have had, and that's actually where did all the Hisuian Pokemon variants go after Pokemon's Legends Arceus. So before I get into it today, as always, like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to turn on the notification bell. You know, it helps out and it's free. But more importantly than that, we are trying to fill out the ranks. It's the race to 100 subs, and I want you to be a part of it. So without further ado, let's get into it. So for the basis of this theory, this is actually something very important, as people are kind of talking about where these Pokemon that were released specifically for the Legends Arceus game, where did they all go? Now, one thing that's very interesting is that we do know that they still exist, and that's not actually just, someone saying they exist. They do exist, because basically the point is this: if they can exist in the Generation 9 games, that means at some point and somewhere in the world they exist. Now, the thing that's confusing is that there's never really an in-canon explanation as to where all of the Hisuian variant Pokemon went. And in the case of some, they're actually wild Pokemon. In the case of the Teal Mask DLC, we actually found that Basculegion and White Stripe Basculin are found in the wild in Kitakami, which makes us think, or at least lead us to believe, that at some point these Pokemon are able to thrive here. However, in Basculegion's Dex entry, it is stated that it can actually live in the frigid oceans, which means essentially that, at least for White Stripe Basculin and Basculegion, their evolution and their evolution line isn't specifically linked to the Legends Arceus game. More so, they are actually linked to different areas of the Pokemon's world. So, in some ways, this does allow us to have the easy cop-out of to where they all went, and that's simply all of them don't exist in modern Sinnoh, based solely on the fact that modern Sinnoh has changed and the environment no longer suits them. Now, that's just the boring answer, which is probably going to be the case, but I do have a better explanation as to why a lot of these Pokemon don't exist in the modern times in the same capacity. Now, for two of them, it's easier to explain because the items needed for their evolution are probably very difficult to find. That being for, in the case of Scyther and for Ursaring, going into Ursaluna as well as Cleavor is much more difficult, considering the Black Argorite, which would normally be found in the Twin or the woods, don't exist in the same capacity, as well as the Crimson Mirelands not existing, meaning that the peat block, whatever the peat blocks are created, are hard to find and or non-existent. Now, this actually leads to what I think the theory is for at least Ursaluna, is that the reason we don't have any Ursalunas in the modern day is because the people that created the peat block, I'd argue, were the people of ancient Sinnoh, the people that came from wherever the region of Sinjoh was that would eventually lead to the creation of Sinnoh. Those are the people that I think created the peat blocks that we find in the Crimson Mirelands in Legends Arceus, which at least is easily able to explain why we don't see Ursaluna in the modern day, because if the peat block is needed and no one's constructing peat block, then it's obvious to put together that Ursaluna cannot exist without peat block, and if we can't make peat block, then we're unable to have Ursaluna. Now, that's just an answer for that one. The reason it's the main answer for that, which is easy, is simply based on the fact that we know that Ursaluna exists there. However, we do know that Ursaluna probably can exist in other capacities just because of something like the Pokemon Go. And I know it's not necessarily a good answer for people, but we do know that in Pokemon Go, you can just simply evolve Ursaring into Ursaluna as long as there's a full moon and you have the candy capacity. So that is also an option. My biggest reason for bringing that up is the fact that we are also having to deal with one of the bigger problems of the Gen 9 games, not explaining how the Arceus Pokemon or the Legends Arceus Pokemon didn't exist prior to their introductions, as we don't see any mentions of them in any of the other games, and it's pretty obvious that they only are existent in the Generation 9 games, simply because they probably need to be introduced into a Generation 9 game, or of this, to be playable in the modern Pokemon games, not just Legends Arceus. Now, for them, it's easier to explain. Now, moving on to some of the ones that are a little bit more difficult, is probably going to be something like Hisuian Braviary as well as Hisuian Gudra. Now, the reason it's harder to explain these two, as there's not really a good explanation as to why we don't see them, because there's not really anything that would kind of curved tail to why we can't find them in modern Sinnoh. And the reason why I have these two specifically is there's no reason that something like Hisuian braviary shouldn't exist in modern Sinnoh. From what we gauge, the powers of Mount Coronet, which I think is supposed to be tied to the reason we have certain evolutions, is probably the reason why we don't have Hisuian braviary. But the best example I have for why we should still have it is that Mount Coronet still possesses its power, as when we eventually visit Spear Pillar in either the Diamond and Pearl games, BDSP, doesn't matter. Point is, we know for a fact that the Spear Pillar still powers exist. So if Spear Pillar's power still exists, why doesn't this Pokemon exist here? And the same thing is with Hisuian and Gudra, as I do think both of them actually explain why neither of them exist. And it's that simply the environmental changes that went through Hisui to Sinnoh modified it so that both of the Pokemon themselves probably don't live there anymore, but doesn't mean you can't find them elsewhere. As I do think my bigger theory here that's going to kind of close it all together is what we're going to see with the Blueberry Academy when we finally get the Indigo Disc. And I do think that it's going to close up these gaps for a few reasons. First, we do know that inside the Blueberry Academy, it has a special biome, one that has very interesting properties. We know that starter Pokemon can be found inside of the Blueberry Academy, but more importantly, in this wild area that they have, we see Pokemon variants that don't normally exist outside of their natural environment, that being the Alolan variant Pokemon, and if I'm correct to assume, we will even see Paradox Pokemon existing inside of this area, just based on the fact that we probably will see the Iron Thorn or I think it's Iron Val, whatever the variant of Cobalion will be. We will see it, as well as we'll see Raikou and Raging Bolt, and I do think that they're actually in the Blueberry Academy. Now, my key thing is with the Blueberry Academy, it explains that they are trying to recreate environments. And by recreating the environments of these old Pokemon, there's a very high chance for them to exist in the modern day by recreating what happens, which at least leads me to believe the main goal of the explanation to where the Hisuian Pokemon are is probably the fact that they are functionally extinct. Now, for those of you guys wondering what functionally extinct means, functionally extinct refers to animals or creatures that don't naturally exist in the wild anymore. Think of it like, it's hard for me to think of one on the top of my head, but there are some animals that are functionally extinct, where they only exist in zoos, preserves, areas where human intervention can protect them. Now, the reason I have to bring this up is that most of the Hisuian Pokemon would actually fall into this line that we know of. That actually falls in between two of them, that we know in the game, that being Hisuian Growlithe, and actually one being in Blood Moon Ursaluna. Now, the reason I say Blood Moon Ursaluna actually falls into being functionally extinct instead of it being a wild creature is that there are no more, and there will be no more Blood Moon Ursalunas in our games. Now, each game doesn't count, so I know everyone could say like, oh, well, you can just get one and your friend can have one. No, that's for a copy, which means it's its own world altogether, like each Pokemon game is. But we have something interesting in the fact that we know for a fact that Perlin, I messed up the name probably, but it doesn't matter. She actually has Hisuian Growlithe. And more importantly than that, she gives you a Hisuian Growlithe at the end of your quest with her to catch Blood Moon Ursaluna. Now, if that is the case, and that means at some point, if there's two, there has to be a small population of Hisuian Growlithe. And if I were to be a person to bet, I'm pretty sure that this isn't explained either with the interaction that we'll have in the Indigo Disc on Blueberry Academy, or what I'm assuming is that there's a population of Hisuian Growlithe specifically, and Arcanine in total, that are probably being watched and taken care of by a certain group of people, which could be descendants, obviously, of the people of the Pearl and Diamond clan that take care of the Hisuian Pokemon, which I do think is probably going to be the answer, which these people that are descendants of those people long, long ago probably still serve a purpose in the modern day, protecting the Pokemon and the species of old of their rich history, and making sure that they are around for the next generation. Now, that's all I've got today, guys. This is actually more of a theory that I want to do for fun, because I've actually played Pokemon for most of my life, arguably longer than most, because it's easier to play than something like Yu-Gi-Oh! And I've had it in my family since I was probably about 2 or 3. So, yeah, that's just my theory to start off with why we don't see the Hisuian Pokemon. If you guys liked it, leave a like, comment, as I said before. But more importantly than that, if you don't agree or have your own opinion, make sure to let me know. because I'm trying to do more than just the content I was doing. However, it's more, I want to do things that I'm feeling good about right now. I've been playing a ton of Pokemon because I just had downtime for it. And if you guys like to see it, share it out, let people know. So I have more Pokemon content coming just because I've been playing the game more. But, it's not going to get in the way of my other content because it's all coming in groves. So, as always, I'm Brad from the Ed Army signing off. And for all of you out there to sign on.